I'm really excited about this panel. I would just mention this to some other folks. Often in technology, we refer to what we're doing as we think we're saving lives, but we're just really building websites and mobile apps. These folks actually are helping save lives. It's really interesting to see how the technology can be used to advance healthcare and life sciences. And we have a great panel today, so I just want to give everyone a chance to do quick intros, and maybe we can start with Shahram.
Thanks, first of all, for inviting me, Art. It's great to be here with my co-panelists. I'm Shahram Seyedin-Noor. I see some friendly faces. Thanks for my friends who showed up here. I am the founder and general partner of a firm called Civilization Ventures. We are a early stage seed and scale fund dedicated to the life sciences and health tech. We have 65 companies we've invested in over the last 7 years, over 100 million of capital. We usually are the first check into health tech companies doing genomics and diagnostics, digital health, AI, as well as gene and cell therapies. And I look forward to this discussion.
Hi, I'm Daniel Young. I'm Director of Data Science and AI at AstraZeneca. My group is within our commercial digital health organization at AstraZeneca. So we mainly work to better understand how our drugs are impacting patients and whether patients are receiving optimal care. So we work with our commercial organization, marketing teams, as well as our medical affairs teams to help them really improve patient outcomes.
Again, thank you for inviting me. So I'm Chao. I'm a cardiologist from the Mayo Clinic, and I'm also visiting Stanford to learn AI stuff and working on new AI projects. So my specialization is in cardiology and echocardiography, aka heart ultrasound. So I probably will be providing some different perspective from a more conservative and safety consideration as a healthcare professional in this panel. But this is like a really exciting time in having generative AI and or overall AI to be involved into the healthcare industry or enterprise. And we're really working on some exciting and also challenging research projects to really improve our healthcare or introducing AI into healthcare. And I will share more in our panel talk.
Great. So, how about just to get started? How is generative AI being used in healthcare and life sciences today? Like, maybe we could. You're invested in so many different companies. Maybe you could.
Sure. Well, it's really across the spectrum. We have companies that are providing care to the end user, in this case, the end patient, using generative AI for chat or enabling people that are interfacing with patients to do a better job. Companies like Verbal AI or Cure AI are examples of that. We have therapeutics companies, obviously, and I'm sure we'll hear more from my co-panelists on that front, that are really focused on using AI to design drugs that humans are not capable of. And these are companies like IKEM out of Berkeley, designing novel therapies for disorderly proteins. These companies are mainly in stealth. You won't find a lot about them probably until the next year or so. We have a company, Outpace, that's doing cell therapies, again, using AI. So these companies are unlocking therapeutics that heretofore were not possible by human design. Diagnostics is a huge area where AI is playing an important role, Oxcan being one of our companies doing cancer diagnostics and several others as well.
Yeah. How about Danny?
Yeah, I'll provide a different perspective on how we're using generative AI. So one of the challenges we see in improving patient outcome is keeping physicians abreast of the latest technology, latest guidelines. As many of you may know, the treatment landscape is continually evolving and becoming more and more complex. And many physicians honestly just don't have time to attend conferences, to read the latest publications. So that's a challenge that we see as an impediment to, optimizing patient treatment outcomes. So we spend a lot of time thinking about, can we understand, where those gaps in knowledge are, which physicians may not have time, to attend conferences. Can we send our medical affairs teams to have those conversations and educate the right people? Can we generate content, educational content for those physicians, whether it's through, chat interfaces or other means? So we view education and how Gen AI can really power that and personalize those educational content as a real sort of lever to improve patient outcomes.
Yeah, it's interesting to learn about the patient outcome part. we can dive into that in a little bit further. Dr. Kev, are you seeing other things too, like maybe even with drug discovery?
I can actually add a little bit about my perspective. So I think right now generative AIs in healthcare institutions are mainly focused on more of a quality improvement perspective, and then many of these works are focused on research as well as on the language model part instead of using like a image generation because these are more like a creativity sort of thing. But so right now, with the focus on language models, I think one of the main issue we are facing is the hallucination, and then we because we're want the models to be we're very conservative and we want safety to be the first priority overall. So the tolerance on hallucinations or incorrect information are like very untolerated in our practice. So yes, I think that part would be still a challenge in our overall implement of all these generative AIs into clinical care.
Are you creating your own models then, or fine tuning from existing models? Or are you creating your own? Or
Yes, so we've been trying to fine tuning language models to say in radiology or in our reporting system, but again, it reduces the rate of hallucination, but it still comes with it. So the next question or the next challenge comes to how do you evaluate whether these generated reports are really valid from a clinical perspective?
If I could just piggyback on that, it's interesting, this idea of hallucinations, right, on Chat GPT. And the reality is, doctors today hallucinate all the time. If you've ever been to a doctor and see the way they diagnose, it's not like they're perfect. So it's a little bit like Elon Musk says when it comes to driving a car. Sure, your autonomous car is going to make mistakes, but so do average drivers. And as long as it's less than those drivers, society is better off. And I think there's no question that healthcare is now in the exact same predicament where there are hallucinations. These are, after all, models that are just pattern matching or generating. In the case of the newer versions of AI, they're going to be imperfect. It's really a data problem. We need to generate better data to train these models. But they're already today at the point where they're better than radiologists. I mean, our company, Chiron, lots of articles in The Economist and New York Times, they're beating radiologists. From a regulatory perspective, they can't be the first line diagnostic decision maker because that's not what's permitted today, but they're better. And there's no question in my mind that if you look 20 years hence, medicinal chemists, doctors, almost everyone will be an AI assistant, not vice versa. Today, AI is assisting us. In 20 years, we'll be kind of sitting there to interpret AI to help the patient. That's going to be a paradigm shift that we're going to inch our way towards, and I think it's beginning of over the next few years.
yeah, it's pretty interesting, especially with the radiology part. So, what does that mean for different regulations and all? Like, how do folks go about?
I mean, I'm interested in my co-panelists' views, but regulations are way behind. I mean, regulators are, not the best people to kind of gate progress. But we're already at the point where regulation is probably holding us back a little bit with respect to where the technology is. The good news is much of AI with drug design and diagnostics is behind the scenes. So the product comes out and goes through the regulatory hurdles as it should. But the AI is already playing a huge role in improving what the product looks like, whether it's a therapeutic or diagnostics, et cetera.
Yeah, in the work I was describing, regulatory is not really an issue. I'm talking about post-approval of therapeutics. Um, so the biggest hurdles for us are our IT departments and our internal legal, regulatory, reviews. And that's, I think earlier we heard about a lot of POCs. That's the state that we've been in for, a year or 2 years. Moving things to production are very hard because we have to go through many hurdles, internal hurdles. But I think we also heard from prior speakers about the EU AI Act. That's a huge focus internally that we've been preparing for years actually at AstraZeneca. So that's really important, and I think it'll shape the way we think about a lot of these use cases, transparency, risk assessments. Yes, it's super important.
Yes, I totally agree that the regulatory is currently stay behind from what we already developed in the technology end. And then what we're really facing is that right now, all the regulations, or even just within the hospitals, we're using AI technologies, but physicians are still taking responsibility of it. Yeah, so I mean, that's how all the environment is going on at this time. But I believe that either the government or different organizations, they should actually take more reaction into this part, and then try to explore how or what kind of regulatory need to be implemented to use these like a Gen AI technologies that are full of potential, but also comes with corresponding risk.
We had some of this for a little bit later, but since we're talking about regulatory, there's even the data rights and data privacy aspects too, right? Like, how does this, as folks were asking before, like who owns the data? So if you are analyzing patients' information, like how does HIPAA play into account or something? Maybe.
I can talk a bit about that. So at AstraZeneca, we work with a wide variety of real, medical data, real world evidence data that goes through lots of compliance checks to make sure it's de-identified. So that's square one. We've been working with that data for many years. There is added risk when you start integrating multiple data sets together, where the risk of patient re-identification goes up. So that has to be carefully reviewed. And that's not actually a new with Gen AI. I think any sort of data science, ML, you know, work has to go through similar compliance. But I think given Gen AI is a bit more of a black box, I think it requires a little bit more scrutiny to understand really, how it's deriving certain insights and how do you validate and have trust in those insights.
Are you using your own local models or publicly available models? Or
So we use all enterprise, license models. So no open source models at this point. Just enterprise, either OpenAI or AWS Bedrock.
Interesting. Dr. Chao, you mentioned the cardiovascular. How is generative AI being used? What are some of the things that you're doing?
Yeah, so I think overall we're still in the very early stage to implement all these generative AI into our fields. So the other specialties, including radiology as well as pathology, so there are the specialties they were told that they're going to be replaced by AI the first, but they turn out like they start embracing AI into their practice, and turn out they are very successful in this kind of strategy. So same, but these two specialties are less patient involved. They're basically more taking care of images or the pathology biopsy slides. But in more clinical or like a patient-oriented specialties, there are some challenges really implementing these AI into it. One, maybe we're a little bit more have safety concerns, or like a more conservative mind to patient care. But what we're trying right now is to take my own research work as an example. So we're trying to build a new generation of an echocardiography interpreting system. So that would be based on generative AI, and then have the system as a co-pilot to help you interpreting whole studies and generate the corresponding report. And as a physician, you can actually review it and then whether decided to approve it or not, or do some revises. And the system will have a like a human and AI interface to have the full capability to interact with human, or to look into the EHR data set to see, based on this patient's finding and based on his or her medical history, what can we suggest for? What kind of therapy need to be implemented, or we need to refer to a specialty doctor to look into his or her problems.
Any of you seen anything around the drug discovery, like using generative AI for that? Any of the startups? Yeah.
Sure. We're seeing a lot there. Now, maybe I'll tackle that from a few dimensions. One is, AI, in my opinion, is not just the new internet. It's kind of, I mean, not just my opinion, a lot of people are saying this, it has the potential to transform society and commerce in a way that's more analogous to the Industrial Revolution, because it'll be a step function. Just a few examples of that, obviously relating to drug discovery. But right now, if you're filing for a small molecule to go into human patients for a phase 1 safety trial, you have to have a 28-day tox in 2 species. You have to have a very big package of, showing why this molecule safe in mice or monkeys, and how that translates to the body weight of a human, et cetera. That's not going to happen 20 years from now, in my opinion. I'd love to see everyone else's opinion, but I just can't imagine we'll be doing animal studies for an IND 20 years from now. That's all going to be generated. We'll just know that information through the right models. So it's not just drug design, it's also designing drugs with foresight on what toxicity might look like, or the pharmacodynamics, pharmacokinetics of a drug might look like. All that is going to be encompassed in AI in a way that's fundamentally transformational for the industry. And so what we're looking for are founders that are seeing that vision and generating that data and training those models. And I'm actually curious, Art, you probably already know this, how many in the audience are founders or intend to start companies in this space? Okay, well, definitely speak to us at some point at Civilization Ventures if you do so.
Yeah, fair enough.
Shameless plug.
Danny, what are some of the use cases you see in helping with the patient outcomes that you're referring to?
Yeah, so essentially we're looking to identify healthcare disparities in the patients. So can we identify using generative AI or general AI in general which kind of patients are not receiving optimal care? And we integrate real-world evidence data with social determinants of health to gain better insights into where those pockets of disparities may lie. And the second question, where generative AI is really helpful, is to try and answer the why question. So first, what's going on, and then can we start to build hypotheses of why that's happening, and then we take those hypotheses and try to vet them with experts in the field, with conversations directly with providers to bear those out. So it's sort of a process from discovery and then testing those hypotheses, and also we work closely with regulators or other stakeholders to help in education to try to break those barriers down and mitigate those disparities.
Talked a little bit about some of the regulatory challenges. Is that the biggest challenge, or what do you see as some of the biggest challenges? And maybe start with Dr. Chao with using Gen AI.
I actually want to talk about
Yeah, go ahead.
adding some point to that. So, like I said earlier, so what we're seeing, these Gen AIs being applied in clinical scenarios are more focused on quality improvement, and then it's more about like saving physicians or nurses time in documenting or to search for data that's like buried in thousands of EHR records. And then I think these are actually very beneficial approaches of using these information or these models in our practice. Because actually, when you save the time, you improve your quality of care, and that ultimately leads to the improvement patient outcome. And then on the other hand, in getting clinical trials done, language models can actually help to search for or identify the optimal candidate that you have set for a certain clinical trial. And then it's because right now the workflow will become like one patient's been identified as a potential candidate in one clinic, and then there will be like emails, communications being sent to the PI of that certain trial. And then that really takes time, and then is not efficient in identifying these potential candidate of a trial. And then I remember there's already a study that using such kind of approach that probably saved them about 50% of time compared to a conventional trial to reach the target they want in their patient cohort.
Yeah, that's super impressive. That we were chatting about earlier, like the virtual patients for, I guess, clinical trials, training, simulation, that kind of thing. If we can go back a little bit on the challenges one, are there other challenges, say, with building trust with making use of Gen AI? Is that an issue on the healthcare life sciences side?
Yeah, I can probably talk about that.
Yeah.
So I think trust is actually a pretty vague or hard to define. Define like what kind of trust is that? For example, in radiology or different clinical tests, we use MRIs or we use CTs. We look at those images, but actually, as a clinical doctor, you probably don't really know how the machine work or their mechanisms behind that. But you still believe, okay, these images comes out and these are probably real, and I still believe in it. So that's so-called trust. But this trust does not necessarily has to build on the comprehensive understanding of how the mechanisms of these machines work in simple AI models. And you could know this AI model works, and then you don't really have to know, okay, what the parameters going on here, what's special in their fine-tuning procedures. You probably don't have to know all that details to build trust on that. And then question comes back, how do we really build this trust onto the current medical devices we have? These were actually, I believe it's more based on the prior clinical studies. These devices were being tested in clinical scenarios from either cohort study, from randomized trials. So in that way, we believe in it. So these are really useful. These are bringing better patient outcomes compared to the control study. So on the other way, right now, all the AI models are aiming for perform as good as humans. So they use like a human validation, human preference to look into how the AI is being performed. But in clinical medicine, we already have a framework to judge how good evidence is. That is, human expert opinions are the lowest among all the evidences. Above that is clinical study, and above that is randomized trials, and above that is a summary article such as a meta-analysis or sort of things that summarizes the evidence from different randomized trials. So we have this kind of architecture in decide what to believe, what are better evidences, and I believe AI models probably would need to go to the same route to being really tested in clinical scenarios to determine, okay, these are really good, really helping patients. We're claiming that AI models are saving our time and getting our better quality of either reporting or patient care quality. These need to be measured and then to be tested in real clinical settings.
If I could just add to that, I think the prior point about regulation and regulatory frameworks are the solution to trust for AI, just as they have been for everything prior to AI, which is to say that, for example, if you go and get a carrier screen test to see if you're a carrier of a recessive disease before you have kids, there are actually a lot of biases in those tests that exist today. Sometimes they don't catch alleles from the Middle East, where I'm from, for certain diseases they'll catch the European allele for that disease, but not a different ethnic group. And so those are problems that are independent of AI. Regulations and controls help solve for that. And I think that'll be the nexus for trust, will be regulation, reinforcing that AI solutions are not based on garbage data and garbage results out, but rather really rigorously trained and reinforced and validated for the ultimate application.
Yeah, just one other perspective on that. So I mentioned that we use a lot of real-world evidence data. So even the best data sets that we get, highly curated EMR data, they're a sliver of the patient population in the U.S. So building on the trust question, we get a lot of questions about how applicable are our insights based on those data to the wider patient population. So I mean, the same question about clinical trials. Trials are a subsection of the actual patient population, and once those drugs hit the real world, performance may not be the same. So the same kind of questions when we build our models and validate them, once we put them into production and infer on the wider patient population, we still have to track performance. I think it's a big question. How do we do that, and how do we ensure that performance is stable?
So there's the potential bias there. What about any like ethical concerns with generative AI in healthcare and life sciences, like guidelines that you're?
Yeah, I mean, I think bias is a huge concern, but generally we don't incorporate, patient ethnicity or other sort of inherent biases in our models. So we sort of try to obscure those kind of things. But there's going to be biases in our data. What can we do to ensure that we put them into production, that the risks are minimized?
Talking about some of the different use cases and areas where it's been working, sounds like fairly well with radiology and all. Perhaps for Shahram, what are some of the areas of investments that you're seeing from an external point of view, external investments into?
Sure. I mean, so stepping back for a minute, AI's impact in biology has been profound. I'm sure everyone in the audience is familiar with AlphaFold and the ability now to kind of predict almost any protein's folding structure based on artificial intelligence, something that would have taken thousands of years using old techniques and was kind of thought to be unachievable. Yet billionaires like D.E. Shaw, the namesake of the hedge fund, putting a lot of money into this. They weren't able to solve it. And so some of his people left and went to DeepMind and AlphaFold, and they solved it. So AI's impact on biology is profound, and it's profound not just in terms of protein folding, but now really any molecular interaction is being more or less accurately predicted today, and will certainly be 20 years from now very accurately, if not 100% accurately predicted. That has profound consequences for how drugs are designed. Again, the job of a medicinal chemist today is to sit there and just mix like an alchemist, try to figure out potions that work in humans. That's going to be seen as almost, I mean, it will be seen as primitive 20 years from now. And so that alchemist will probably be called a chemoinformatics, AI assistant of some sorts. And I think you can't really overemphasize how important AI will be to biology and drug development. And I won't even get into the implications for genomics and IVF, and I think what will happen in 30 years. But if you want, we can talk about that later.
Well, it touched upon an interesting thing, though, is just the medical education itself. Like, how has that kind of changed with either having access to generative AI for learning or making use of generative AI in your role?
I would say most physicians are skeptical, right? I mean, most people that are kind of old school PhDs and physicians are like, oh, I don't know, it's not validated yet. That's been my experience. And so, you guys, I would love your views on how it's being viewed with successive generations of professionals at AstraZeneca or the Mayo. You guys are young, so you're probably part of the new guard.
Well, I can actually comment on that. I would love to embrace the opportunity to having these Gen AI technologies into the education of next generation doctors or any healthcare professionals. So imagine what we do for education right now. If we're looking for a certain disease or certain case, it probably has to be based on our own experience and then what we could find in our educational materials. Either it's a textbook or it's somewhere in your database. But when you have an generative AI system that incorporates all the medical knowledges, either from the literature or either from the patient distributions within your hospital, you can actually query it and then get the corresponding information out from it. And then that could be also identified. You don't really have to deal with like a patient privacy issues going on with that part. And then you can have a really good case for teach. And then in the meantime, these can be interactive. Why don't you just like implement your chatbot with this simulated patient on it, and then have the chatbot act as an agent? So in the past, we have a clinical ability test to see if you like it. Really, you can see the patients in a simulated scenario. And then, of course, the manpower of doing this is high, and then the associated cost. But with an AI agent, you can have the AI agent act. You can give them some certain script saying like, acting as a patient with A disease or B, and then you have some concerns, you have something to do, and have the AI agent teach the medical students. And then during that interaction, they can learn how to really do this interaction. And of course, you can go back and monitor their chat history to see if there's something wrong, something we need to intervene or make it better on the medical student performance. So I think this is really an opportunity and what the future would look like.
I'll just say, in terms of education, we find the best performance in very targeted sort of therapeutic domains, not a general purpose solution. So, if we're looking at, say, lung cancer, we can, tailor a solution around that and all the guidance documents and latest therapies and treatment modalities, diagnostic approaches. So then, we have high confidence in, the material that we're serving up as educational, and we can provide references and links back to the underlying data. So I think that's important to build trust. It takes a lot of domain expertise, and that's why we spend a lot of time with our internal experts building out these systems and validating them.
It's actually interesting area too. What are some of those strategies for like ensuring a successful adoption of Gen AI, say in AstraZeneca?
It's actually a pretty slow process. I think a lot of folks are fairly skeptical, and we think about our solutions based on the persona of the individual. So if somebody's out in the field talking to people, they don't have a lot of time to second guess any LLM generated insights. Versus somebody maybe in headquarters who's an expert in their field, is willing to work with slightly less validated or more uncertain insights because they can pressure test and give feedback. So it depends on the persona. and how we craft the solution and we tailor the solutions based on those personas.
Maybe from the investment perspective, how is generative AI affecting the landscape amongst startups? Is it helping level the playing field? Or?
I don't know if it's leveling the playing field. It is certainly creating a new hype cycle. I don't know who's been following kind of the IPO pipeline, but there's a new company, Tempest, doing $500 million in revenues that's about to go public. They filed their S1. They literally changed their website to Tempest.ai. And this is a diagnostics company. It's like I'm not even clear how AI plays into what they do. Doesn't matter, right? They're about to go public, got to put that secret sauce, AI, 50 times revenues as opposed to 1 times or 0.8 times revenues, which is how LabCorp, or twice revenues, or Quest would trade. So it is, we are at the kind of year zero of a new hype cycle, having just concluded one in biotech. And I think it'll last at least 7 years. And the crescendo will be similar to the late 90s and the dot-com boom, which that's when I started my career. So it's dramatically impacting the landscape. I see it in my own startups in 2 flavors. One, we have AI-only companies or AI-first companies where their product is predicated on AI being the driving engine of the innovation. These are companies like Outpace or Curai or Verbal or IKM and a host of others. Then there are other companies like Omada Health, which hopefully will be public soon enough, doing diabetes prevention and management, where we want to see them integrate AI so they're not leapfrogged by some other AI company, which just started at Stanford last week, because this company's been around for 10 years and has raised $500 million. So I think that the legacy companies have to be responsive. They will, of course, be, as mentioned by my co-panelists, more conservative because they don't want to destroy their culture or their product by just putting AI in it. But that's the advantage of new companies, is that they don't care about it. They have no legacy. They just start with AI first, AI native, and they'll be very disruptive. So our job is to decipher between the good and the bad, and just doing our best. Haven't solved that problem yet. It's very new, but yeah.
Definitely, everything's moving so fast. It can be hard to keep up on everything. In a weird way, it does. Maybe it doesn't level the playing field. It democratizes it, like people having access to.
It disrupts it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, disrupts. Yeah. So I have one more question for the panel, then open it up if anyone has questions. What do you see happen in the future? Is there something you'd like to see happen, or what do you predict? And maybe we can start at the end with Dr. Chao. Yeah.
For the future.
Yeah, the future.
Yeah, so I think for the healthcare institutions, or comparatively, overall healthcare institutions are slower than the tech companies or new startup to embracing or getting all these AI technologies into our practice. But I think we're moving toward the positive side, and I think there are some certain things I'm hoping to see to improve this. First of all, I think with the improvement of the accuracy on these AI models, one day we can actually be not um, liable for all those decisions that is supported by the AI systems. Because right now, I think part of the concernings that we have to ask these AI systems to be perfect is that we're still taking the ultimate responsibility of any decision error or the ultimate goal on the ultimate outcome on patients, right? So if someday, either from the regulatory or from legal standpoint, all these AI systems supporting your diagnosis, and they also kind of share some of the liabilities, and then that becomes a more equal or more balanced human and AI interaction in such a practice. And then, so that's number one. And then number two, for clinicians, I'm hoping to see like a more and more clinicians like embracing all these newer technologies into the practice, really using it like they trust on the more conventional or other medical devices. And of course, this could take time because it's probably going to need another 5 to 10 years to really have the next generation medical students who are used to ChatGPTs, who are used to language models in their lives. And then, so these generations will be the ones really who natively embraces all these new technologies.
Yeah. So I think one key thing is evolving. Obviously, it's personalized medicine, and how do we use Gen AI to facilitate that? And it's not just one solution. It's from drug discovery. Even one step before that is understanding the complexity of disease in humans. I think we all recognize it. every patient is unique, and what's driving their disease can be very different. So it's almost like every patient needs, a tailored treatment plan for them. So how do we make that come to be? I think generative AI can help, help the physician make the right choice, help design clinical trials to, validate these personalized approaches, work with diagnostics companies to help, determine the right treatment plan for a given patient. That's going to take a concerted effort across all the different players in the healthcare space. From pharma plays one role, but physicians, patients, regulators are all part of the picture.
I agree with everything that was said, and at the risk of being a little provocative, so everything that we've discussed around healthcare, I think in the next 15 years, that's really table stakes. Of course, diagnostics, therapeutics, interactions with physicians will be fundamentally changed by AI. But looking 15 years beyond that, 30 years into the future, I think we're talking about species level change. hate to put it that bluntly, but we're talking about, an article came out this morning, the New York Times, the preponderance of the evidence points towards lab leak origin for COVID. That means that human beings were sitting in a lab in Wuhan manipulating the SARS, and it ended up in a pathogenic virus that killed 25 million people. That's going to be lightweight in comparison to what could happen with AI 10 years from now by just someone sitting and designing something, because they could just spit out all the parameters of what they want. I want a pathogenic virus that does X, Y, and Z, and they'll be able to achieve it because we have DNA synthesis, we have DNA sequencing. So that's kind of like, my mind sometimes goes there and really thinks about the perils and promise of AI from that 30, 50, and that's, by the way, not a long time from now. 30 years, I think hopefully everyone in this room will be around to see that, and I think you'll be kind of shocked at what we see. Not to mention 1.5% of births in the US today are IVF. I think it'll probably be 20, 30%. Who would want to roll the dice on the intelligence of their children if they could design it? They won't. And so you're going to see a species level change. And what is AI? AI is nothing more than, when you zoom out, than hyper intelligence, super intelligence, things that we can't imagine. So that's what AI is. And so just imagine everything today and everything in our species and in our society going through that filter. That's what the next 30 years will look like.
Fascinating stuff. I've mostly been using AI to generate cat photos, so this is quite a bit more impressive. I just want to see if the audience has any questions for the panel in the back there. Yeah.
Thanks for that, guys. That was awesome. It's just a question for Daniel, just off the back of something you said about AstraZeneca using the closed models, so the proprietary models, and using things like retrieval augmented generation in your current work. Sorry to talk about the rival POS, but I was at the London Gen AI Summit the other day, and I was speaking to the head of AI products at GlaxoSmithKline. And they were saying that within pharmaceuticals and within medicine, the closed models aren't fit for use. Retrieval augmentation isn't fit for use due to the complexity of language and the protein structures and acronyms that are used within medicine. Do you think that retrieval augmented generation and maybe tool use will have a use within medical Gen AI moving forward, or do you think that the industry will become reliant on fine-tuning models to be domain specific?
No, that's a good question. So I think we spend a lot of time building a semantic layer, right, that sits between the models and the user query to make sure that the domain-specific knowledge is understood by the large language model. That also captures our business knowledge as well, therapeutic knowledge. So all that's embedded in in the stack. We're not using these models without that semantic layer in between. So yeah, I think on the the intent of the question is first checked, and then on the back end we have guardrails as well to make sure the output is fit for purpose as well.
So my friends who are doctors always talk about, I believe, adherence, compliance, right? So they tell someone, goes to the doctor, low sodium diet, low fat diet. They literally drive away from the doctor's office and go to McDonald's, right? Which is super frustrating to them, right? Because the patients do not adhere to what they tell them to do to get better. And I'm curious if you guys see any way where Gen AI could help with that kind of vexing problem.
Yes, so I think that that's a great question. We actually already have examples that's being conducted in clinical study. I think that's the Stanford team who conducted the glucose control study. They are delivering their service through is it Amazon chatbot, or so they're basically using that to their local device at home, and then those devices have like a chatbot function. They basically can follow the patient's blood sugar level and then remind them, oh, if you need to take your drug, you forget it, or you need to have additional insulins to yours. And then the study group was actually showing better glucose control compared to the control group. So I think that's one way, because so-called patient compliance and patient adherence issues is actually the conversation about your healthcare is only happen in doctor's office. And then when you're out of it, you forget about it basically. And then this kind of technology is actually sending doctors or a little assistant to your house and give you a daily or every 8 hours reminder that you must be compliant. This is good for your health. Someone's like talking behind your ears, and then that actually helps and then improve patient outcome. So I think this part is like a really exciting application on this, and that's very simple approach without like a very fancy technology advancement, but it's like a really good use case on these kind of technologies.
Maybe at the risk of being a little contrarian, I'll say that even though AI tools can help with monitoring and wearables and compliance, the one thing AI is not going to change is human nature, right, and human behavior. And as you see it in society over the last 50 years, Americans are getting unhealthier every year. Like every metric is going in the wrong direction, and so I don't think it'll solve that, because it's not going to solve how we behave. But of course, I agree with Jiro that we have a lot more tools at our disposal. Frankly, if there was an app in my house right now that tied in Amazon with Ring and the 20 things around my house, they would know everything I do at every second, because there's cameras everywhere. But hopefully they don't turn on that switch. And I'm sure the government's already monitoring it, but I probably wouldn't consent to a company doing it.
I want to thank everyone for being part of this, and give everyone a round of applause.